You are listening episode 7 featuring of a true story shared by the author Kamnap.
Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a look at Chapter 6 of 4 Years and 9 Days, My Life in the Kingdom of Hell. It's by Kamnap.
Wow.
It's a really powerful story, and I think it's even more so because it's actually a translation and an adaptation of a Khmer poem.
Oh, wow.
And it was based on notes that Rithia wrote after they escaped to Canada.
Yeah.
So we're picking up about a month after the fall of Phnom Penh to the Khmer Rouge.
Right.
And the author and their family are still really just trying to figure out what's going on and where they even fit in this new world.
Absolutely.
One of the things that's really interesting is that Rithia uses the present tense, which makes you feel like you're right there with them as they're going through these experiences.
Yeah. It's May 1975, and they're living with about 200 other people in this temporary location, and you can really feel the fear and uncertainty that they have as the Khmer Rouge are hunting for anyone that they consider to be a capitalist or even just tied to the old government. And there's this really chilling moment when you realize that re-education is actually a euphemism for execution.
Yeah, it's definitely a stark reminder of just how brutal the Khmer Rouge regime was.
For sure.
There was that strange incident with the American ship, the Mayaguez.
Yeah.
It was like this little hint that maybe, just maybe, someone would intervene.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because for you, right in the middle of all this upheaval, it must have felt like a real beacon of hope.
It did.
Here's this powerful nation seemingly standing up to the Khmer Rouge.
Right.
But as we know, the Mayaguez incident was a lot more complicated than it seemed back then.
Oh, absolutely. You mentioned it actually happened in early May 1975.
Yeah.
Just weeks after Phnom Penh fell. Can you take us back and tell us what happened?
Absolutely. Just imagine the world is watching Saigon fall.
Right.
And there's this feeling of despair in Cambodia, and you and your uncle are glued to the radio, hoping to hear something, anything from Sihanouk.
Yeah.
Because you still believe he's in charge.
Exactly.
And suddenly, a news report cuts through the static.
Okay.
An American cargo ship, the SS Mayaguez, has been seized by the Khmer Rouge in the Gulf of Thailand.
Wow. Talk about out of the blue. What were the Khmer Rouge thinking?
Yeah.
I mean, was it a mistake? Were they trying to provoke someone?
The exact motivations are still debated today.
Really?
Some people believe it was a deliberate act of defiance.
Okay.
The Khmer Rouge showing off their power on the world stage.
Interesting.
Others argue it was a huge miscalculation, fueled by paranoia and a misunderstanding of America's power.
Okay.
Whatever the reason, the seizure of the Mayaguez triggered a swift and forceful response from the United States.
Right. President Ford ordered that military operation to get the crew back and recapture the ship. It felt like everyone was holding their breath, just waiting to see what would happen.
And what's really interesting is that the crew of the Mayaguez had already been released.
Why?
By the time the U.S. military operation began,
Wow.
it was a tragic miscommunication and miscalculation.
So what happened?
Airstrikes were launched on Cambodian targets.
Oh, no.
And there was a fierce battle on Koh Tang Island.
Okay.
They thought the Khmer Rouge were holding the crew there.
Right.
Sadly, several American servicemen lost their lives in that operation. Such a tragedy.
It must have been devastating to realize that this glimmer of hope had actually brought more violence and sorrow.
Absolutely. And I remember how quickly after that, the Khmer Rouge just shut down that window to the outside world, taking away the radio.
Absolutely. It's a stark reminder of their control over information.
Yeah.
And their determination to isolate the Cambodian people from any outside influence.
It really is. So now, we've been under Khmer Rouge rule for over a month.
Right.
The initial shock has worn off.
Yeah.
And it's been replaced by this really grim reality.
And so in this chapter, section 1 is titled New Life in Kampong Speu.
Okay.
That sound kind of ironic to you?
Very much so.
Yeah, because their life is anything but new.
Right. It's definitely a forced new life, and they're forced on this march to the northwest, and you get these really heartbreaking descriptions of children suffering from exhaustion and hunger.
Yeah.
You know, it really just drives home the human cost of this political upheaval, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's so easy to forget that behind these big historical events, there are real people who are going through just incredible hardship.
Yeah, and they eventually reach Phnom village, which used to be a Khmer Rouge base. And they end up in this old wooden house with, multiple families all crammed in together.
Right.
It's a drastic change from the life that they knew before.
Okay, so let's jump into section 2. Rediscovering Stone Age tools and living in the dark.
Okay.
This is where things get really fascinating, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Rithia describes watching the Khmer Rouge make fire.
Uh-huh.
And they're using bamboo and cotton and metal and porcelain.
Wow.
What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's almost like a symbol, isn't it?
Yeah.
The country is being forced back in time, rejecting all this modern technology.
Right.
And it's really fascinating how Rithia picks up on this detail and, so many others that really reveal a lot about what daily life was like under the Khmer Rouge.
Yeah.
And there's this constant lack of basic necessities, especially light.
Right.
Rithia actually learns how to make torches from scratch.
Yeah, and they're learning this from Ta'el, who's the farmer whose house they're living in.
Right.
Which makes me think about the distinction that's made between the newcomers, the city evacuees, and the base people, which is what they call the Khmer Rouge. And it feels like a very deliberate way to create a divide.
Oh, absolutely. The newcomers are seen as suspicious, potentially tainted by the old ways, whereas the base people are like the elite. They're the ideologically pure revolutionaries.
Right.
And this power dynamic really plays out in every aspect of their lives.
Yeah.
I mean, they're constantly living in fear of being accused of something.
It sounds incredibly oppressive.
Oh, for sure.
But even in all of this darkness, there are these like glimmers of light. Ta'el and his wife, they show kindness to Rithia's family, even though it could put them at risk.
Yeah.
It's like this small act of humanity in this otherwise bleak situation.
Right.
What do you think that says about people's ability to hold on to their values, even in these really extreme circumstances?
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah, it really makes you think about, the risks that Ta'el and his wife were taking to help.
Right, and it's not just about passive acts of kindness, is it? Because Rithia doesn't just, sit back and wait for things to get better. They actually learn how to survive, like making porches,
right,
weaving rope from palm tree materials.
Yeah.
I mean, these are pretty impressive skills to pick up under so much pressure.
It shows real resourcefulness. Like, they're refusing to be completely broken by this regime.
Yeah, it makes me think that they must have had some hope for the future.
Yeah.
Because, if they thought this was it, like the end, why even bother learning these new skills?
It's a good point. It's like maybe it's a way for them to hold on to their identity, their sense of self in this world that's trying to erase it.
Right, and there's also this detail about fish traps that are just kind of hanging there in the kitchen, exposed to all the smoke.
Oh, yeah.
It feels like a little hint at their resourcefulness.
Yeah.
Like a way to sustain themselves in this environment.
Exactly. It speaks to that human ingenuity and the will to survive. Even when people are stripped of their basic freedoms, they find ways to adapt and persevere.
It's incredible how Rithia observes these subtle details. Like the way they describe the difference between the newcomers, people who are evacuated from the city, and the base people, the Khmer Rouge.
Yeah, it's such an important distinction.
Yeah.
Because it really just underscores that whole us versus them mentality that the Khmer Rouge cultivated.
Right.
The newcomers are always viewed with suspicion.
Right.
Like they might be tainted by the old regime, whereas the base people are seen as these pure revolutionaries.
Yeah. Do you think that that was intentional?
Oh, I think so.
Like a strategy to maintain control?
Absolutely. It creates this hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
Where the base people have all the power,
right,
and the newcomers are constantly having to prove their loyalty.
And remember, this is all happening while the country is going through this radical transformation.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the cities are empty, money's abolished.
It's crazy.
And the Khmer Rouge are trying to create this agrarian utopia.
Right. It's this massive social experiment, but with these devastating consequences.
It's easy to get lost in, the grand narrative of history.
For sure.
But Rithia's account really brings it down to like a human level.
Yeah.
You see the fear, the deprivation, but you also see the resilience, and you see that kindness from people like Ta'el and his wife.
Right.
And it reminds us that even in a totalitarian regime, people can still retain their humanity.
Absolutely. And Rithia's own determination to learn and to adapt, I think, really just speaks to that enduring power of the human spirit.
Yeah.
It's not just about surviving.
Right.
It's about holding on to that hope for a better future.
It brings us back to Rithia's skill as a storyteller.
Absolutely.
They don't just describe the horrors, they also capture these small moments of humanity.
Yeah.
Like these glimpses of resilience that kind of shine through all the darkness.
And that's what makes this account so compelling, so relatable. It reminds us that even in the face of unimaginable suffering, the human spirit can endure and even find ways to flourish.
So as we move towards the end of this chapter, what stands out to you as the most significant takeaway?
Well, for me, it's that contrast between the brutality of the regime and the resilience of the human spirit.
Yeah.
You know, we see the fear, the deprivation, the violence.
Right.
But we also see those small acts of kindness, the determination to survive.
Yeah.
And it's all conveyed through Rithia's just incredibly vivid description.
Right.
It's like we're right there with them, you know, experiencing it all firsthand.
For sure. What about you? What resonates most with you?
I think it's the power of observation. Like, even in this horrific situation, Rithia is still able to notice these tiny details, these acts of kindness. And I think that says something about their mindset, you know, their will to hold on to their humanity.
That's a really good point. It speaks to the power of storytelling as like a form of resistance. You know, even though Rithia can't openly challenge the regime, they're still preserving their memories. Making sure that this history won't be forgotten.
It's almost like a coping mechanism.
Like a way to create order and meaning in this world that's been completely turned upside down. It makes you wonder, how would you cope if you're in a situation like that?
Right.
So we leave Rithia at the end of chapter 6. And I just can't help but think, like, what impact will this have on in the long run? You know, will this forced resourcefulness and adaptability become a part of who they are?
It's a great question. I mean, trauma can definitely shape us, but, you know, it can also foster resilience. Maybe it deepens their appreciation for, you know, the simple things in life.
Right. We've talked a lot about all the hardship and the struggle, but what really strikes me is that Rithia is choosing to learn. They're actively trying to find ways to improve their situation instead of just accepting their fate.
Right.
What do you think that says about their mindset?
Well, I think it definitely suggests a belief that this, you know, this nightmare isn't going to last forever. They're preparing for whatever comes next.
Right.
Holding on to that little flicker of hope. It's pretty inspiring.
Yeah, it is. And it leaves me wanting to hear more about their journey. But for now, what would you say is the most important thing that you want our listeners to take away from chapter 6?
I think it's the reminder that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can still endure. We see this horrific reality of life under the Khmer Rouge, but we also see incredible strength and adaptability. We see those small acts of kindness, the determination to survive, and the refusal to be completely broken.
Wow, that's a powerful message. And it's all thanks to Rithia's incredibly vivid storytelling.
Right.
You know, we're transported to that time and place, and we experience it all right alongside them.
Yeah, that's what makes personal narratives so important.
Right.
They bring history to life in a way that, you know, textbooks never could.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I hope you're all left with a new perspective on the human impact of the Khmer Rouge regime. And maybe it'll even inspire you to learn more, to reflect on the importance of memory and resilience and the fight for freedom and dignity.
It's a story that definitely stays with you, and it makes you think about the power of the human spirit to overcome even the most unimaginable challenges.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope it left with you a deeper understanding of this complex chapter in history. Don't forget to comment, follow, subscribe, and share with your friends to stay updated on our upcoming episodes.